Okay, I was born into a pretty important New York City family at the time. Of course, I didn't have any choice. I was just happened to be born through a guy that started the company called Simon and Schuster, the well-known publishing company that my father began maybe 15 or 20 years before I was born. And this thing really grew, and by the time I was born, he was making a lot of money for his time in the world. And I lived in Greenwich Village in the lower part of Manhattan, sort of in the bohemian era, the beat poet era of New York, and was the youngest of four children. And we grew up in a rather urban, sophisticated environment with a lot of famous people in and out of the house all the time. A lot of music, a lot of writers, because my father was always reading manuscripts. And my mother and he had a very extended family. And my father was nice enough to buy a brownstone in Manhattan and fill it up with all the relatives, in-laws and brothers and sisters and uncles and aunts. And so in this context of Greenwich Village, I had a very, very loving and encompassing childhood, which actually lasted until I was about 6. And then we moved to the suburbs of New York in a town called Riverdale, which is an affluent section of the Bronx. The Bronx being rather, funky and full of graffiti and dirt and ugly buildings and subways. But our little section was this rarefied, tree-lined, nice lawned, beautiful shrubs area. And the reason we moved there was because my father kept getting parking tickets in front of his own building in New York. And he got angry. He said, I own this building. I shouldn't have to pay parking tickets for my own part of the sidewalk. He was so mad that we moved. He moved the whole family up there when I was 6. And the main part of my childhood, I was growing up in this really wonderful house full of all the amenities of a privileged childhood. And I grew up thinking everyone lived like that. I didn't realize that not everyone had chauffeurs and maids and people coming in to do the plants and the cleaning and a nanny cooking the food. And it was really one of those, those kind of families that you read about that I was part of. So I suffered both the consequences and also the amenities of that kind of wonderful childhood. The consequences being that I grew up sort of entitled and always felt that I was somebody special. Because my father also acted very much like that, that the world revolved around him and his creativity and his charisma. And that, I think, in the long run worked against me because I kept having things handed to me too much. I don't think I had to struggle hard enough, especially in my early years. And I also grew up with 3 loving sisters who just doted on me, older sisters, and a mother that doted on me. So I was always caressed and loved and kissed and paid a lot of attention to because I was the only boy. And my father, unfortunately, grew sicker and sicker as I grew older. And he died an untimely death at the age of 60 when I was only 12, which means I was 48 when he was born, right? Yeah. And he was 48 when I was born. And one gift that he gave me, of the few times that we ever really spent quality time together, was this gift of photography. Because besides being a publisher and a great pianist and a very charismatic, warm, ingratiating, witty guy, he also had a camera strapped around his neck all the time. And I have visions of him always focusing on me, or focusing on my sisters, or my mother, or our friends. And one day he said, Peter, I want to show you. Son, I want to show you what it's like behind that door with a red light on it. The red light meaning that I could go in when it was off, but I couldn't go in when it was on because it would expose all the film and the paper. Because I always said, Daddy, what do you do behind that red light? So he finally took me in and showed me when I was about 8. And I have this very distinct memory of sitting on the counter next to the enlarger where I was positioned and watched him take the negative and hold it up to the light and go, get rid of that dust, no dust. Put it back in the enlarger, focus it, and then take this blank paper out of the paper safe, stick it on the easel. I was just like watching him thinking, what is this man doing here? And then he'd turn on the light and the paper was exposed for what he'd counted off, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Not 10, just 9. And he would take the picture, put it in the developer, the tray, which would be on the other side of me, and then all of a sudden, this paper would suddenly become a photograph, and the blacks would come in very slowly, and it would just sort of evolve over a minute or two, and I was just fascinated with that. I just could not believe that this was happening. And he would say, Peter, this is how we make pictures. This is a developer. This is paper. This is the way it's enlarged. And I took it all in. I was a sponge for all that information. And then he put it into the wash, shortstop, I think it was called, and then into the fixer. And then it would be dried, and washed and dried, and then I would behold this picture, usually taken of our family. And I was just hooked from then on in.